The man standing at the corner looked like winter itself, all sharp angles and moonlight skin, and when Petra Dalton asked him how to get to Ashwell Street, he simply turned and began walking. She should have been alarmed. The fog pressed thick around them, muffling the distant hum of the city, and this stranger hadn't spoken a single word, just started moving with the kind of certainty that suggested he knew exactly where he was going. But exhaustion made fools of everyone, and Petra had been on her feet for 12 hours at the diner, her sneakers worn thin, her lower back screaming. So she followed, because what else was she going to do? Wander these unfamiliar streets until dawn. He walked just ahead of her, never looking back, his white hair catching what little light filtered through the fog. He wore dark clothes that seemed to absorb the night around them, elegant in a way that didn't belong in this industrial quarter with its shuttered warehouses and cracked pavement. Petra kept pace, clutching her bag against her side, watching the straight line of his shoulders, the measured rhythm of his steps. They walked in silence for what felt like 20 minutes, though time had a strange quality in the fog, elastic and uncertain. He turned corners without hesitation, leading her through a maze of back streets she didn't recognize, until suddenly they emerged onto a familiar avenue, and there, 3 blocks down, was the entrance to her apartment building. Petra stopped, staring. How did you? But when she turned, the street behind her was empty. The fog had swallowed him whole, or maybe he'd never been there at all. She stood there for a long moment, heart hammering in her chest for reasons she couldn't quite name, before hurrying home and triple-locking her door. It became a strange routine after that. Once a week, sometimes twice, Petra would work the late shift that ended at midnight, and the buses stopped running at 11:30 through that part of town. She'd started taking the route through the warehouse district because it was faster, because she was tired and wanted her bed, and every single time she'd get turned around in the fog that seemed to perpetually hang over those streets, and every single time he'd be there. Sometimes he stood beneath a broken streetlight. Sometimes he leaned against a wall, hands in his pockets. Once, she found him sitting on the edge of a fountain that hadn't run water in decades. But always, when she asked for directions, he would rise and walk, and she would follow, and he would lead her home without a word. Petra told herself it was coincidence. She told herself he must live somewhere along the route, that their paths simply aligned. She told herself a lot of things because the alternative that this pale, silent stranger was somehow always exactly where she needed him to be made her skin prickle with a feeling she couldn't name. 3 months into this odd arrangement, she finally tried to make conversation. "Do you work around here?" she asked his back as they walked. The fog was particularly thick that night, turning the streetlights into blurred halos of gold. He didn't answer. "I'm Petra," she tried again. "I work at Mel's Diner, the one on 43rd. Nothing. "Strong, silent type, huh?" She laughed, but it sounded nervous even to her own ears. "That's fine. I talk enough for both of us anyway. My roommate says I could talk to a wall and carry the whole conversation." His pace never faltered, his posture never changed, but something about the set of his shoulders suggested he was listening, even if he wouldn't speak. So Petra talked. She told him about the regular who always ordered black coffee and left religious pamphlets as tips. She told him about her classes at the community college, how she was studying to be a paralegal, even though she wasn't sure that's what she really wanted. She told him about her younger brother who called every Sunday from 2 states away, about the stray cat that had started sleeping in the alley behind her building. He never responded, never even turned his head. But he was there, every time, and somehow that steady presence became something she relied on without quite realizing it. 6 months in, Petra's roommate moved out and she couldn't afford the rent alone. She found a smaller place across town, further from the diner, but the buses ran later on that route. She wouldn't need to walk through the warehouse district anymore. Her last night taking the old route, she found herself strangely reluctant. The fog hung heavy as always, and there he was, standing beneath the awning of an abandoned shop, watching her approach with eyes that caught the light like mirrors. "I'm moving," she told him, stopping a few feet away. This close, she could see that his skin wasn't just pale, it was luminous, like porcelain lit from within. "This is probably the last time I'll come through here." For the first time in 6 months, he moved, not to walk, but to tilt his head slightly, studying her with an intensity that should have been frightening, but somehow wasn't. I just wanted to say thank you, Petra continued, gripping the strap of her bag. I know this is weird and we don't really know each other, but you've been kind, in your own strange way. So, thank you. Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. Then he turned and began walking, and she followed him home one last time. When they reached her building, Petra lingered on the steps, watching him stand in the pool of shadow just beyond the streetlight's reach. She wanted to say something else, something meaningful, but the words tangled in her throat. He inclined his head, just barely. A nod or maybe a bow. Then he was gone, and Petra climbed the stairs, feeling like she'd just said goodbye to something important without understanding what it was. The new apartment was nice. Better heating, closer to the college, safer neighborhood. Petra threw herself into her studies, picked up extra shifts at a diner closer to home, and tried not to think about fog-wrapped streets and silent guardians. She lasted 8 months. It was a Tuesday night, unremarkable in every way, when Petra found herself walking through the old warehouse district again. She told herself she was taking a shortcut. She told herself the buses were running late. She told herself it had nothing to do with the fact that she'd been thinking about white hair and mirror-bright eyes more often than she cared to admit. The fog welcomed her back like an old friend, and her heart hammered as she turned down the familiar streets. Would he be there? Had he only appeared because she needed directions, or had there been something more to those silent walks? She saw him standing at the intersection of Marks and Fifth, exactly where she'd first asked him for help a year ago, and relief flooded through her so strongly it almost hurt. "Hi," she said, breathless even though she hadn't been running. He looked at her, and this time she caught something in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or recognition, the way you might look at something you'd thought lost and found again. "I don't actually need directions," Petra admitted. I wanted to see if you'd still be here." He remained motionless, watching her with that unnerving intensity. "Is that weird?" She laughed, nervous. "That's probably weird. You were part of my routine, I guess, and I missed it. Missed this." She gestured vaguely at the fog, the empty streets, him. "Does that make any sense?" For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Then he did something he'd never done before. He smiled. It was small, barely a curve of his lips, but it transformed his entire face from something austere and untouchable to something almost gentle. "Yes," he said, and his voice was like dark velvet, unused to speech but shaped perfectly for it. "That makes sense." Petra's breath caught. "You talk. On occasion. You have a British accent. I have many accents. I found this one serves in modern England well enough." He tilted his head. "You moved. Across town. Better apartment." "I know." At her look, something flickered in his eyes. "I saw the moving van. You were watching?" He didn't answer, but the silence felt like an admission. Petra should have been unsettled, should have been scared, or at least wary. Instead, she felt something warm unfurl in her chest. "What's your name?" He hesitated, as if the question required careful consideration. "Soren. Soren Winter." "Soren," she repeated, tasting the name. It fit him somehow, old and elegant and strange. "I'm Petra, but I guess you probably know that already." "I do." He moved then, just a small step closer, and Petra realized he was tall, several inches over 6 feet, with the kind of presence that filled spaces without effort. "You shouldn't be here, Petra." "Why not?" "These streets aren't safe. They were safe enough when I walked them before." Something passed across his face. That was different. How? But he'd already turned, beginning the familiar walk, and Petra hurried to catch up. This time felt different, though. This time, he walked beside her instead of ahead, and when she stole glances at him, she sometimes caught him looking back. "Why do you come here?" she asked. "To this district, I mean. There's nothing around here but empty buildings." "I have my reasons." "Are you always this mysterious?" "Yes." She laughed, surprised. "At least you're honest about it." They walked in companionable silence for a while, and Petra found herself studying him more openly. His clothes were expensive, she realized. Not flashy, but the kind of quality that spoke of serious money. His coat alone probably cost more than her monthly rent. And there was something about the way he moved, fluid and precise, like a dancer or a fighter. "Are you going to keep walking me home?" she asked as they approached her new building. Even though I'm not in the old neighborhood anymore? Soren stopped, turning to face her fully. In the better lighting of this street, she could see his eyes were a pale gray, almost silver, and they held in weight that made her think of old things, ancient things. Would you like me to? Petra's heart did something complicated in her chest. Yeah, she said softly. I would. He nodded once. Then I will. It became a new routine. Petra would text him she'd gotten his number that night, typed into her phone with shaking fingers, and he would meet her wherever she was. Sometimes at the diner, sometimes at the college, sometimes at the grocery store when she worked late inventory. And he would walk with her through fog or rain or the rare clear night, and they would talk. Well, Petra would talk. Soren would listen, occasionally offering brief comments that were always perfectly timed, sometimes funny in a dry way that made her laugh. He never spoke about himself, deflecting her questions with the skill of someone who'd had centuries of practice, though Petra didn't think of it in those terms yet. She was falling for him. She knew it, felt it happening like a slow tide rising, and couldn't bring herself to stop it. There was something about Soren that called to her, something beyond his looks or his mysterious nature. When he was near, she felt safe in a way she'd never experienced before, protected, cherished, even though he'd never said as much. 4 months into their new arrangement, Petra made a decision. Come up, she said when they reached her building. It was past midnight, the streets empty, the fog creeping in from the river. I'll make coffee. Soren hesitated. I don't drink coffee. Tea then, or just, come up, please. He looked at her for a long moment, and Petra had the strange sense that he was wrestling with something bigger than a simple invitation. Then he nodded and followed her inside. Her apartment was small but cozy, filled with second-hand furniture and plants she was trying desperately to keep alive. Soren stood in the center of the living room, looking around with an expression she couldn't quite read. It's not much, Petra said, suddenly self-conscious, but it's home. It's lovely, he said quietly. It suits you. She busied herself making tea, hyper-aware of him in her space, of how he seemed to fill the small apartment with his presence. When she brought the cups to the coffee table, she found him examining the photos on her bookshelf, her brother's graduation, her parents before the divorce, her and her college friends. This is your family, he said, not quite a question. Yeah, that's Jeremy, my brother. And those are my parents, back when they still liked each other. She settled onto the couch, curling her legs under her. What about you? Do you have family? Soren sat in the armchair across from her, his movements careful and controlled. In a manner of speaking. That's cryptic. I'm a cryptic person. I've noticed. She sipped her tea, studying him over the rim of her cup. Why do you do this, Soren? Walk me home, I mean. Every time I ask without fail? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because I want to ensure you arrive safely. But why? We were strangers when this started. We're less strange now, but still. Why me? His hands tightened on his untouched teacup. You needed help. Lots of people need help. You don't walk all of them home. No, he agreed softly. I don't. Petra set down her tea, leaning forward. I'm not trying to pry. I want to understand. This thing between us, whatever it is, I want to understand it. Soren met her eyes, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. What do you think it is? I don't know, she admitted, but it feels important. It feels like something I shouldn't ignore. He stood abruptly, moving to the window, his back to her. The line of his shoulders was tense, like he was holding something back with great effort. Petra, he said, his voice low. There are things about me you don't know. Things that would change how you see me. She rose, moving to stand behind him. Then tell me. I can't. Can't or won't? Both. He turned and she was startled to find him closer than she'd expected. You should stay away from me. But I don't want to. You don't understand. Then help me understand. The words burst out of her, frustrated and pleading. God, Soren, I've been falling for you for months, and you're this impossible mystery, and I don't know what to do with these feelings because you won't give me anything to work with. The silence that followed was deafening. Soren stared at her, something raw and vulnerable crossing his face, and Petra realized what she'd just admitted. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I shouldn't have. He kissed her. One moment there was distance between them, and the next his hands were cradling her face and his lips were on hers, and Petra's mind went completely blank. He kissed her like she was precious, like she was something he had wanted for so long he'd almost forgotten how to hope for it. And when he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "I have been walking you home for 3 years, Soren said roughly, his forehead pressed to hers. 3 years, Petra. Long before you ever saw me." She blinked, trying to process his words. "What?" He stepped back, running a hand through his white hair, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked shaken. "The night you first asked me for directions, that wasn't the first time I'd been there. I'd been watching over you, making sure you got home safely for 3 years before that." Petra's mind reeled. "That's not possible. I would have noticed. I didn't want you to notice. I stayed in the shadows, kept my distance, but I was there. Every time you worked late, every time you walked those streets." His voice dropped. "Every time you were in danger." "Danger!" Her heart was hammering now. "What danger?" Soren turned away again, and when he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. 3 years ago. You worked late on a Thursday night. You took your usual route home through the warehouse district." "Do you remember?" Petra thought back. 3 years ago, she'd just started at the diner, was still learning the routes home. "Vaguely." "You were followed. 3 men, drunk and looking for trouble. They would have caught you in the alley behind the old textile factory." He paused. "But they didn't, because I stopped them." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. "You stopped them," Petra repeated slowly. "Yes." "How?" His jaw tightened. "Does it matter?" "Yes," she said firmly. "It matters." "What did you do, Soren?" He finally turned to face her, and there was something in his eyes that was both proud and resigned. "I killed them." Petra should have run, should have screamed, called the police, done any number of rational things. Instead, she found herself asking, "How?" Soren smiled, but there was no humor in it. "You really want to know?" "I really want to know." He moved faster than her eyes could track, suddenly right in front of her, and when he spoke again, she saw them fangs, elegant and deadly, where his canines should have been. "I drained them," he said softly, "every drop, and then I burned the bodies so thoroughly there was nothing left to find." Petra's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the couch, staring up at him. "You're a vampire." "Yes." "A real vampire." "Yes." "And you've been following me for 3 years. Protecting you," he corrected gently. "There's a difference." Her mind was racing, trying to fit this new information into everything she knew about him. "The fog. It's always foggy when I see you. I can manipulate mist and shadow. It's a useful skill for staying hidden. Your eyes, they reflect light. Like a cat's, yes. You never ate or drank anything when we met." "I can't. Not human food, anyway." Petra pressed her hands to her temples. "This is insane. This is absolutely insane." Soren knelt in front of her, carefully keeping his distance. "I know, and I'm sorry. I never meant for you to find out this way." "Were you ever going to tell me?" "Honestly, I don't know." He looked away. "I told myself I was protecting you, that as long as you didn't know you'd be safe, but the truth is, I was protecting myself too. Because telling you meant risking this exact moment, the moment you look at me and see a monster." Petra studied him, this man, this vampire who had been a constant in her life for longer than she'd known, who had saved her, protected her, walked with her through countless nights, who had kissed her like she was everything. "Are you going to hurt me?" she asked. "Never?" "Have you ever wanted to?" He flinched. "Once, the first time I saw you. You cut your hand on a broken glass at the diner, and the scent of your blood." He closed his eyes. "But I left before you noticed me, stayed away for a week until I could trust myself, and after that, it got easier. You became more than blood to me. You became you." "What am I to you?" Petra asked quietly. Soren opened his eyes, and the look in them made her heart ache. "Everything. You are everything to me, Petra Dalton. And that is why I should walk away right now and never come back." "Don't," she said immediately. "Don't you dare. You don't know what you're asking." I know exactly what I'm asking. She reached out, taking his cold hand in her warm one. I'm asking you to stay. I'm asking you to stop protecting me from shadows and let me see you clearly. I'm asking for the truth. His hand tightened around hers. The truth is complicated, then uncomplicated. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. I'm not just any vampire, Petra. Well, they call me a king. The vampire king of the Northern Territories, to be precise. I have responsibilities, enemies, a whole world you know nothing about, and all of it is dangerous. Is that why you were in the warehouse district that first night? Vampire business? Yes, there was a rogue killing indiscriminately, drawing attention. I was tracking him. Soren's expression darkened. I found him the same night I found you. He'd been watching you too, planning to make you his next victim. So I killed him, and then I made sure you got home safely. And the next night, I told myself I just wanted to confirm you were all right. And the night after that, I told myself I was simply being thorough. But you kept coming back. I kept coming back, he agreed softly, because somewhere between protecting you and watching you live your life, I fell in love with you. Completely, irrevocably in love with a human woman who had no idea I existed. Petra's breath hitched. You love me. Yes. For 3 years. Yes. She should have been angry, should have felt violated, stalked, betrayed, and maybe part of her did. But the larger part, the part that had been falling for him these past months, understood something important. He had loved her from a distance, asking nothing, expecting nothing. He had kept her safe without demanding gratitude or recognition. And when she'd finally seen him, he'd still asked nothing, content to simply walk beside her. That's really creepy, you know, she said. He winced. I know. Like, seriously concerning behavior. I know. I should probably run screaming. You probably should. Petra pulled him closer instead. I'm not going to. Soren's eyes widened. Petra, I'm not saying this isn't weird because it definitely is. And we're going to have a very long conversation about boundaries and consent and what it means to actually be in a relationship with someone instead of just watching them from the shadows. She cupped his face, feeling the cool silk of his skin under her palms. But I'm not running, because I've been falling for you too, and I want to see where this goes. You could get hurt. My world is dangerous, and my enemies would love to exploit any weakness. Then we'll be careful. You could die. I'm going to die anyway, eventually. That's what humans do. She smiled. But I'd rather live first. With you, if you'll have me. Soren made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob, and then he was kissing her again, his hands tangling in her hair, and Petra kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. I don't deserve you, he murmured. Probably not, she agreed, but you're stuck with me anyway. They stayed like that for a long moment, just breathing each other in. Then Petra's practical side reasserted itself. So, she said, Vampire King, that's a thing. It's a thing. Do you have a castle? Several, actually, though I prefer my residence here in the city, less drafty. Do you sleep in a coffin? Good God, no. I have a perfectly comfortable bed, thank you. Can you turn into a bat? He pulled back to give her an incredulous look. Do I look like I can turn into a bat? I don't know. I've never met a vampire before. She paused. Are there others? Other vampires, I mean? Many. We have a whole society hidden within the human world, courts and councils and politics that make human government look simple. Petra's mind reeled with the implications. And you're in charge of them, the ones in the Northern Territories? More or less. I have advisors, a council of elders, but yes, final decisions rest with me. That sounds stressful. It has its moments. She settled back on the couch, pulling him with her. He sat carefully, as if afraid of doing something wrong, and Petra found it endearing. This ancient, powerful vampire king, terrified of making her uncomfortable. Tell me about it, she said. Your world. I want to know. So he told her. About the courts hidden beneath the city, accessible through doors that looked abandoned but led to halls of marble and gold. About the blood contracts that governed vampire society, the strict laws that kept their kind secret from humans. about the different factions, the old families, the eternal dance of power and politics. He told her about his age over 800 years and the weight of living that long, about the loneliness of immortality, watching everyone you cared about age and die, about the careful distance he'd learned to keep, the walls he'd built around his heart. "Until you," he said quietly. "You broke through every defense I had without even trying." Petra listened, asking questions, trying to understand. Some of it was frightening, the casual violence, the inhuman lifespans, the predatory nature that even Soren couldn't fully suppress. But some of it was beautiful too. The loyalty, the honor, the old codes that governed behavior. "What about the sun?" she asked. "Will it kill you?" "Not kill, but it's painful, weakening. I can manage brief exposure if necessary, but I prefer the night." "And blood? You said you can't eat food." "Human blood is what sustains us. Animal blood works in a pinch, but it's like living on bread and water. Functional, but not pleasant." Petra swallowed. "Do you kill people? For blood?" "Not anymore. Not for centuries." He met her eyes steadily. "We have donors now, humans who provide blood voluntarily in exchange for compensation. It's strictly regulated, carefully monitored. No one is harmed without their consent." "But you used to. Kill people, I mean." "Yes," he said simply. "I was young once, and reckless, and the world was different. I've done terrible things, Petra. I won't lie to you about that." She nodded slowly. "And the men who followed me 3 years ago? They would have hurt you. I have no regrets about stopping them or how I did it." Looking at him, at the fierce protectiveness in his eyes, Petra found she didn't have regrets about it either. Maybe that made her a bad person, or maybe it just made her human, capable of holding complicated truths at the same time. "So what happens now?" she asked. Soren was quiet for a moment. "That depends on you. I can walk away if that's what you want, disappear from your life and make sure no one from my world ever troubles you." "Is that what you want?" "No," he said fiercely, "but what I want doesn't matter if it puts you in danger." "What if I'm willing to take that risk?" "Then I would say you're being reckless and foolish, and I should convince you otherwise." He smiled slightly. "But I'm too selfish to try very hard." Petra grinned. "Good. Because I'm not going anywhere." Her expression grew more serious. "But I need you to promise me something." "Anything. No more watching from the shadows. No more protecting me without my knowledge. If we're doing this, we're doing it together, as partners. That means being honest with each other, even when it's hard." Soren looked pained. "Petra, I've been protecting you for 3 years. It's not something I can just stop." "I'm not asking you to stop protecting me. I'm asking you to let me be part of the decision, to trust me enough to tell me when there's danger instead of just handling it yourself." She squeezed his hand. "You said you loved me. Love means trusting the other person to make their own choices." He was quiet for a long time, clearly struggling. Finally, he nodded. "You're right. And I will try. But you have to understand, Petra, keeping you safe is not just what I do. It's who I am. Especially with you. I know, and I appreciate it. I really do. Just let me help. Let me be part of your world instead of something you keep separate from it." "My world is dangerous." "So you keep saying. But I'm tougher than I look." He smiled at that, real and genuine. "I'm beginning to realize that." They talked until dawn began to lighten the sky, and Soren grew restless, his skin prickling from even the indirect sunlight. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "Will I see you tonight?" "If you want to." "I want to." Petra walked him to the door, suddenly reluctant to let him leave. "Soren," he turned back, "thank you for saving me 3 years ago and every day since." His expression softened. "Thank you for seeing me, the real me, and not running." "Yet," she teased, and was rewarded with his rare laugh. He kissed her once more, gentle and sweet, and then he was gone, moving faster than her eyes could follow. Petra stood in her doorway for a long moment, touching her lips, wondering if this was all some strange dream. But when she went to bed and finally slept, she dreamed of silver eyes and white hair, and a love that had waited 3 years to be acknowledged. The next few weeks were an adjustment. Petra threw herself into learning about Soren's world, asking endless questions, meeting some of his trusted people. There was Lucian, his second in command, who watched Petra with open suspicion until Soren told him to back off. There was Elena, an older vampire who served as an advisor and who seemed cautiously pleased that Soren had finally found someone. Petra learned about the different vampire courts, the territories they controlled, the complex web of alliances and rivalries that governed their society. She learned that Soren's position as king meant he had responsibilities he couldn't ignore, summons he had to answer, threats he had to address. And she learned that loving him meant accepting all of it, the beautiful and the terrible, together. They had their first real fight 3 weeks in, when Petra found out Soren had handled a threat to her safety without telling her. It was nothing, he insisted, looking frustrated. A young vampire who made some threats. I dealt with it. By doing what, exactly? By making it clear that you are under my protection and anyone who threatens you will face consequences. Without telling me I was threatened in the first place. Because I didn't want you to worry. That's not your decision to make. Petra was furious, pacing her small living room. We talked about this, Soren. We agreed you wouldn't keep things from me. This was different. How is this different? He was quiet for a moment, then said quietly, because I can't bear the thought of you being afraid, of you looking over your shoulder, wondering if you're safe. I want to give you peace, Petra, even if it means carrying the burden alone. Her anger deflated slightly. That's really sweet and really stupid. He blinked. I what? You can't protect me from everything, Soren, and trying to will just drive us apart. She moved closer, taking his hands. I know you're used to handling things alone. 800 years of being in charge, I get it. But I'm asking you to let me in. All the way in. That includes the scary parts. I'm trying, he said, and he sounded almost helpless. But it goes against every instinct I have. Then we'll work on it. Together. She squeezed his hands. But you have to actually try, Soren. You have to trust me. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I do trust you. It's the rest of the world I don't trust. I know, but I need you to trust me to handle knowing about the rest of the world. I'll try, he murmured into her hair. I promise I'll try. And he did. It wasn't perfect. He still had a tendency to be overprotective, to want to shield her from anything unpleasant, but he got better at telling her when something was wrong, at including her in decisions that affected her safety. Petra, for her part, tried to understand the impossible position he was in. He said, loving a human when you were immortal meant knowing you would lose them eventually. Every moment was precious, because there would never be enough of them. She tried to be patient with his protectiveness, even as she pushed back against it. 3 months into their relationship, Soren invited her to see his home. It's underground, he explained as they walked through the warehouse district, the same streets where they'd first met. Most of our important sites are, safer from the sun, easier to hide from humans. He led her to what looked like an abandoned subway entrance, long since closed to the public. But when he touched a seemingly ordinary tile on the wall, the rusted gate swung open smoothly, revealing stairs that descended into darkness. Stay close, Soren said, taking her hand. They went down and down and down until Petra lost count of the steps. Just when she was beginning to feel claustrophobic, they emerged into a vast underground chamber that took her breath away. It was beautiful. Soaring ceilings supported by pillars of white marble, lit by what looked like thousands of candles, but was actually some kind of magical light. Rich carpets covered the floors and tapestries hung on the walls depicting scenes from history. Vampires moved through the space with elegant purpose, many of them stopping to stare when they saw Petra. This is the Court of Night, Soren said quietly, the seat of power for the Northern Territories. A tall vampire with dark hair approached, bowing slightly to Soren. My lord, we weren't expecting you tonight. I'm showing my companion the court, Lucian. Soren's hand tightened on Petra's. Petra, you remember Lucian? Of course. Petra extended her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Lucian took it. A pleasure, Miss Dalton. His eyes flicked to Soren. The council has been asking when they might meet her formally. Soon, Soren said firmly, but not tonight. Lucian nodded and melted back into the crowd. Soren led Petra deeper into the complex, showing her the great hall where the council met, the library filled with books older than some countries, the gardens where night-blooming flowers grew under artificial moonlight, and finally, his private chambers. They were surprisingly simple. A large bedroom with a massive bed, a study lined with bookshelves, a bathroom that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. Everything was in shades of black and silver and deep blue, elegant but not ostentatious. "You live here?" Petra asked, looking around. "Most of the time. I have other residences, but this is home." He watched her nervously. "What do you think?" "I think it's beautiful. And a little overwhelming." She turned to him. "You're really a king. Like, really, really. Does that bother you?" "Yes? No? I don't know." She laughed shakily. "It's just a lot to process. You're not just some vampire. You're the vampire, the one in charge. People bow to you. Only because I'm old and marginally good at keeping everyone from killing each other." "Soren," he sighed. "Yes, I'm a king. I have power and influence and more responsibilities than I sometimes want. But with you, I'm just me. Soren, the man who loves you." Petra moved into his arms, resting her head against his chest. "I love you too. You know that, right?" She felt him go still. "You've never said that before." "I know. I was waiting for the right moment." She pulled back to look at him. "I love you, Soren Winter. Vampire king, overprotective guardian, man who walked me home for 3 years because he couldn't stand the thought of me being hurt. I love all of you." He kissed her then, deep and hungry, and Petra felt herself melting into him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes had gone dark with want. "Stay," he murmured. "Stay here tonight, with me. I don't have any of my things. I'll have someone bring them, or we'll buy new things. I don't care." His hands framed her face. "I just want you here, with me." How could she say no to that? They fell into bed together, and Petra learned what it meant to be loved by someone who had waited centuries to find her. Soren was gentle and passionate by turns, attentive to every sound she made, every shift of her body. His skin was cool against her warmth, his strength carefully leashed, and Petra had never felt more desired or more cherished. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the massive bed, Petra's head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. "I could get used to this," she murmured. "Good." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Because I intend to keep you." She laughed. "Possessive much? You have no idea." But his tone was light, teasing. They drifted into comfortable silence, and Petra was nearly asleep when Soren spoke again. "There's something else I need to tell you." She opened her eyes. "That sounds ominous." "It might be." He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "The vampire who was in the warehouse district 3 years ago, the one I killed before he could get to you. He wasn't alone." Petra sat up, suddenly wide awake. "What?" "He was part of a group, rogues who rejected the laws of the courts, who wanted to hunt humans freely without restriction." Soren sat up too, his expression grim. "I killed him and 2 of his companions that night, but there were others. They scattered after, went underground. I've been tracking them ever since, making sure they don't hurt anyone else." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because they are back, in the city, and they know about you." Fear spiked through her. "How?" "Because I've been too visible lately, spending time with you, bringing you here. I tried to be discreet, but nothing stays secret forever in our world." His jaw tightened. "They see you as a weakness, a way to get to me. So that vampire who threatened me a few weeks ago was one of them, testing the waters, seeing how I'd react." Soren took her hands. "I'm telling you this because I promised no more secrets. But I'm also telling you because you need to be careful, Petra. These vampires are dangerous, and they will try to use you against me." Petra's mind raced. "What do we do?" "I've already increased security. You'll have guards watching you even when you can't see them, and I'd like you to stay here in the court where I can protect you better. Soren, I have a job, classes, a life. I know, and I'm not asking you to give those things up. Just let me keep you safe. Please." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could take care of herself, but looking at his face, seeing the genuine fear there, she couldn't. "Okay," she said quietly. But you have to promise me something in return. Anything. You end this. Whatever it takes, you end this threat so we don't have to live in fear." His eyes darkened. "I intend to." The next few weeks were tense. Petra moved most of her things into Soren's chambers, though she still went to work and classes with a rotating guard of vampires who tried very hard to look inconspicuous and failed completely. She could feel them watching her, shadows at the edge of her vision, and while it should have been comforting, it mostly just reminded her that she was in danger. Soren was gone more often, hunting the rogues, trying to track them down before they could make a move. When he was with her, he was attentive and loving, but she could feel the tension in him, the barely leashed violence of a predator preparing for a fight. It came to a head on a Thursday night. Petra was closing up at the diner, wiping down tables while her guard, a vampire named Marcus, waited by the door. She'd gotten used to his presence over the past weeks, even found him surprisingly good company during her breaks. She was just hanging up her apron when the lights went out. "Marcus?" she called, her heart suddenly hammering. No answer. Petra fumbled for her phone, turning on the flashlight, and that's when she saw him. Marcus was on the floor, unconscious or worse, and standing over him was a vampire she didn't recognize, pale like all of them, but with something wild and feral in his eyes. "Hello, Pet," he said, his voice oily and unpleasant. "The king's little human. We've been wanting to meet you." Two more vampires emerged from the shadows circling her. Petra backed up until she hit the counter, her mind racing. Soren had made her promise she'd scream if she was ever in danger, that she'd call for help immediately. But her phone was in her hand, and if she could just... One of them moved faster than she could track, and suddenly her phone was across the room, shattered against the wall. "None of that now," the first vampire said. "We want the king to know we have you, but in our time, not yours." Petra's mouth was dry with fear, but she forced herself to speak. "Soren will kill you for this." "Oh, we're counting on him trying." The vampire grinned, showing too many teeth. "That's rather the point." They grabbed her then, and Petra fought, screaming and kicking and clawing. But they were so much stronger than her, inhumanly strong, and within seconds they had her restrained. "The hard way then," one of them said, and Petra felt a sharp pain at her neck before everything went dark. She woke to the sound of screaming. Petra's head throbbed and her neck ached, but she forced herself to sit up, trying to get her bearings. She was in some kind of basement, old and damp, with a single bare bulb casting sickly yellow light. And across the room, through the open doorway, she could see chaos. Vampires fighting, moving so fast they were barely more than blurs. Blood on the walls, the smell of smoke and something worse, something burnt. And in the center of it all, Soren. She'd never seen him like this, never seen the full extent of what he was, what he could do. He moved like death itself, graceful and terrible, cutting through the rogues with a precision that spoke of centuries of practice. His eyes had gone completely silver, glowing in the dim light, and his fangs were extended, blood staining his mouth. He was terrifying. He was beautiful. He was hers. One of the rogues broke away from the fight, heading for Petra, and she scrambled back against the wall. But before he could reach her, Soren was there, catching the vampire by the throat and lifting him off his feet with one hand. "You touched her," Soren said, his voice cold and absolutely lethal. "You took her. You hurt her." "We didn't," the vampire gasped, clawing at Soren's hand. "You put your hands on what is mine." Soren's grip tightened. "And for that, you die." There was a terrible crack, and the vampire crumpled. Soren dropped him and turned to Petra, his expression shifting instantly from deadly to concerned. "Petra." He was beside her in an instant, his hands gentle as they checked her over. "Are you hurt? Did they—" "I'm okay," she managed, though her voice shook. "They knocked me out, but I'm okay." Relief flooded his face, followed immediately by rage. He turned back to the remaining rogues. There were only two left standing, and there was nothing human in his expression. "Run," he said softly. "Run, and I might let you live long enough to regret this." They ran. Soren let them get almost to the door before he moved, impossibly fast, and then there was more screaming, more blood, and Petra closed her eyes because she couldn't watch, couldn't see him like this, even though she understood why. When silence fell, she felt his presence beside her again. "It's over," he said quietly. "You're safe now." Petra opened her eyes to find him kneeling in front of her, blood spattered and deadly, and looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "You killed them," she said. "Yes? All of them?" "Yes." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she didn't, he cupped her face gently. "I'm sorry you had to see that. I'm sorry I couldn't get here sooner. How did you find me?" "I felt it the moment they took you. The bond between us, it's strong enough that I knew something was wrong." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "I've never been so terrified in 800 years. Petra leaned into his touch, trying to process everything. "Is it really over? Are there more of them?" "These were the last, I made sure of it." His expression hardened. "No one will threaten you again. I've made that very clear to anyone who might have been considering it." She should have been horrified, should have been scared of him, of what he'd done, what he was capable of, but all she felt was relief and a bone-deep exhaustion that made her sag against him. Soren gathered her into his arms, lifting her easily. "Let's get you home. Marcus is alive, injured, but he'll heal. I'm more concerned about you right now." He carried her out of that terrible basement, past the bodies of the vampires he'd killed, up into the cool night air. There were other vampires waiting Lucian and Elena, and others she didn't know, but Soren walked past them all without a word, holding her close. Back in his chambers, he settled her on the bed and disappeared into the bathroom. Petra heard water running, and then he was back, helping her out of her clothes with gentle, impersonal efficiency. "Bath," he said quietly. "You need to wash the smell of them off you." Petra let him guide her to the bathroom, too tired and shaken to protest. The tub was massive, already filling with hot water that smelled like lavender, and when she sank into it, she finally let herself cry. Soren knelt beside the tub, holding her hand while she sobbed, saying nothing because what was there to say? She'd been kidnapped by vampires, threatened, used as bait. She'd seen the man she loved turn into something out of nightmares to save her. When her tears finally subsided, Petra found her voice. "Thank you for coming for me." "Always," Soren said fiercely. "Always, Petra. No matter where you are, no matter what it takes, I will always come for you." She squeezed his hand. "I know." He helped her wash, his touch careful and tender, and then wrapped her in the softest towel she'd ever felt before carrying her back to bed. He'd changed the sheets while she bathed, she noticed. Everything was fresh and clean, no reminder of the blood and violence. "Sleep," he murmured, pulling the covers over her. "You're safe now, I promise." But when he moved to leave, Petra caught his hand. "Stay, please. I need to clean up. After. Stay with me until I fall asleep." He hesitated, then nodded, climbing into bed beside her, still wearing his blood-stained clothes. Petra curled into him, ignoring the smell of violence that clung to him, focusing instead on his presence, solid and real and alive. "I'm not sorry," Soren said quietly, "for killing them, for what I did. I know that probably makes me a monster, but I'm not sorry." "I know," Petra said, "and I'm not sorry either." She felt him relax slightly against her. "You should be. You should be horrified." "Maybe, but I'm not." She tilted her head up to look at him. "They would have killed me, wouldn't they? If you hadn't come. Eventually. Or turned you without your consent, which would have been worse." Petra shuddered. "Then I'm glad you killed them. I'm glad you were fast and strong and terrifying enough to save me." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Sleep, love. We can talk more tomorrow." And she did, falling into exhausted sleep with the Vampire King holding her close, standing guard even in rest. When Petra woke, it was to find Soren in the chair beside the bed, clean now and wearing fresh clothes, watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "How long have I been asleep?" she asked, her voice rough. 14 hours. It's evening." She sat up slowly, taking stock. Her neck was sore where they'd drugged her, and she had bruises on her arms from being grabbed, but otherwise she felt okay. Better than okay, actually. Safe. "How are you feeling?" Soren asked, surprisingly good considering. She patted the bed beside her. "Come here." He moved instantly, sitting beside her, and Petra took his hand. "I've been thinking," she said. About us, about what happened. Soren went very still. Petra, let me finish. She took a breath. What happened last night? It showed me something. How dangerous your world really is. How being with you means accepting that danger as part of my life. You want to leave, he said flatly. I understand. I want to stay, she interrupted. But not like this. Not as your human girlfriend who needs constant protection, who's a weakness people can exploit. His brow furrowed. What are you saying? Petra met his eyes steadily. I'm saying I want you to turn me. I want to become a vampire. The silence that followed was absolute. Soren stared at her like she'd just suggested flying to the moon. No, he said finally. Absolutely not. Why not? Because it's not a decision to make lightly, Petra. Because once it's done, it can't be undone. Because... He stood abruptly, pacing. Because I won't be responsible for taking your humanity, your life, everything you are. You wouldn't be taking anything. I'd be giving it freely. You don't understand what you're asking. Then explain it to me. Petra got out of bed, moving to stand in front of him. Make me understand why this is such a terrible idea. Soren ran a hand through his hair, clearly agitated. The turning process is agonizing. It feels like burning alive from the inside out, and it takes days. Days of pain so intense, most humans go mad before it's over. But they do survive. You survived it. 800 years ago, when medicine meant leeches and prayer, the mortality rate was over 50%. His expression was anguished. I could kill you, Petra. The process could kill you. And I would have to watch you die knowing I was responsible. Or it could work, she countered, and we could have forever instead of just a few decades. Is that what this is about? Living forever? No, it's about living freely. Petra took his hands. I love you, Soren. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. And I want to be with you, really with you, not just the human you have to protect. I want to be your equal, your partner in every sense. And I can't do that if I'm always going to be the fragile one, the weakness in your armor. You're not weak. In your world I am, and you know it. She squeezed his hands. Last night proved it. I was helpless, Soren, completely at their mercy. And if you hadn't come when you did... She trailed off, not wanting to finish that thought. Soren closed his eyes. The idea of losing you, of the turning going wrong and watching you slip away, it's unbearable. The idea of being taken again, of being used against you, of living in fear, that's unbearable too. He opened his eyes, and there was such pain in them, it made her heart ache. If something went wrong, then we'd deal with it, together. Petra moved closer. But I think it would work. I think I'm strong enough. I know you are. That's not the question. Then what is? He was quiet for a long moment. Do you understand what you'd be giving up? Sunlight, warmth, the taste of food, growing old, children, a normal life. I've never wanted a normal life, Petra said honestly. And as for the rest, I'd trade all of it for forever with you. You say that now, and I'll say it a year from now, 10 years from now, whenever you're ready to hear it. She cupped his face. I'm not asking you to turn me tomorrow. Soren, I know it's a huge decision, but I need you to know that this is what I want, really, truly want. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly it almost hurt. I need time to think about this, to make sure it's really possible, to prepare. I can give you time. And if I say no, if I decide it's too dangerous, Petra pulled back to look at him. Then I'll accept that. But I hope you won't. Because I really, really want to spend eternity annoying you with my endless questions and bad jokes. Despite everything, he laughed. Your jokes aren't that bad. Liar. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they parted, his expression was still troubled. But there was something else there too. Hope, maybe. Or possibility. I'll think about it, he said quietly. I promise. It was enough. For now, it was enough. The next few months passed in a strange sort of peace. The threat had been eliminated, and Soren seemed determined to make sure Petra enjoyed every moment of her remaining human life, as if he'd already decided to grant her request and was giving her one last chance to change her mind. They traveled together, always at night, to places Petra had only dreamed of seeing. Paris, where they walked along the Seine under streetlights. Rome, where Soren showed her vampire catacombs older than the city itself. Tokyo, Prague, Barcelona. Each city held secrets, hidden vampire courts, and ancient meeting places, and Soren shared them all with her. Petra met more of his world, the council of elders who governed the northern territories alongside him, most of whom were cautiously accepting of her presence. Other vampire kings and queens who ruled their own territories, some friendly, some less so. The complex web of alliances and politics that Soren navigated with practiced ease. And through it all, they grew closer. Petra learned his moods, his tells, the things that made him laugh. He learned hers, too, became adept at reading when she needed space or comfort or distraction. They fought sometimes, usually about his lingering overprotectiveness, but they always made up, talking through their issues instead of letting them fester. It was, Petra thought, the healthiest relationship she'd ever been in, which was ironic, considering it was with an 800-year-old vampire who had spent 3 years stalking her. 6 months after she'd first asked to be turned, Soren came to her with an answer. They were in his study, Petra curled up in one of the leather chairs reading while he worked through correspondence. It was comfortable, domestic in a way that still surprised her sometimes. "I spoke to Elena," he said suddenly, setting down his pen. Petra looked up from her book. "About?" "The turning process. She's one of the oldest vampires I know, and she's successfully turned more humans than almost anyone." He turned to face her fully. "She believes you would survive it." Petra's heart stuttered. "She does?" "Yes. Your age is in your favor young enough that your body will adapt more easily. Your health is excellent, and you're stubborn." He smiled slightly. "That helps more than you might think. The will to survive, to push through the pain, it matters." "So you'll do it?" Petra hardly dared to hope. Soren rose, moving to kneel in front of her chair. "I have conditions." "Okay. First, you wait. 1 more year as a human, to make absolutely sure this is what you want." Soren. 1 year, Petra. In the span of eternity, it's nothing. But it will give you time to be certain, to think about what you're giving up. His expression was serious. "If after a year you still want this, I'll turn you myself." Petra considered. A year seemed like forever when she was this certain, but she could see the fear in his eyes, the desperate need to make sure she wouldn't regret this. "Okay," she said, 1 year. What else?" "You learn our laws, our history, everything you need to know to survive as a vampire." He took her hands. "The world changes when you turn. You'll be stronger, faster, but also hungrier, more emotional in some ways, less in others. I want you prepared." "I can do that." "And third," he hesitated, "you have to say goodbye. To your brother, your friends. You can't tell them what you're becoming, but you need to prepare them for the fact that you'll be different, that you'll have to step back from their lives." That one hurt. Petra hadn't thought much about the practicalities of becoming a vampire, the way it would mean leaving behind everyone she'd known. Her brother Jeremy, who called every week. Her college friends, her co-workers at the diner. "I'll have you," she said quietly. "You'll have me," Soren agreed, "and my world, but I need you to understand what you're walking away from." Petra nodded slowly. "Okay, 1 year to prepare, to learn, to say goodbye. And then you'll turn me." "Then I'll turn you," he confirmed, "if you still want it." "I will." He pulled her down into his arms, holding her close. "I hope you know what you're getting yourself into." "I'm getting forever with you," Petra said. "That's all I need to know." The year that followed was bittersweet. Petra threw herself into learning everything she could about vampire society, studying their laws and history with the same intensity she'd once brought to her paralegal courses. She learned about blood contracts and territorial rights, about the ancient families and their feuds, about the delicate balance between vampire and human worlds. She also started to distance herself from her human life, slowly and carefully. She quit her job at the diner, telling them she'd gotten a position at a law firm that required odd hours. She reduced her course load at college, then eventually stopped going altogether. She saw Jeremy less often, their weekly calls becoming bi-weekly, then monthly. It hurt, pulling away from the life she'd known. But every time she wavered, she thought about the alternative growing old while Soren stayed young, watching him have to mourn her in a few short decades. That hurt worse. And through it all, Soren was there, patient and supportive, answering her endless questions, introducing her to vampires who could teach her specific skills. He made sure she understood exactly what she was choosing, never sugarcoating the difficulties. "You'll have to feed," he told her one night, "every few days, fresh blood. We have donors, people who provide it willingly, but it's still something you'll have to do to survive." "Does it get easier?" Petra asked. "The need for blood?" "You learn to manage it, but it never goes away completely." He looked at her seriously. "You'll feel the hunger always, like a low hum in the background. And sometimes, when you're stressed or injured, it will roar. Have you ever lost control?" "Once, a long time ago." His expression darkened. "I killed someone I didn't mean to, someone who didn't deserve it. It's one of my greatest regrets." Petra took his hand. "I'll be careful, and I'll have you to help me. Always." As the year drew to a close, Petra made her final preparations. She called Jeremy one last time, telling him she was moving overseas for work, that she'd be out of touch for a while. He was confused and hurt, but she held firm, hating herself for lying, but knowing there was no alternative. She gave away most of her possessions, keeping only a few precious items, photos of her family, a necklace her mother had given her, the worn copy of her favorite book. And then, on a cold November night exactly 1 year after Soren had agreed to turn her, Petra stood in his chambers and said, "I'm ready." Soren looked at her for a long moment. "You're sure?" "Completely. There's still time to change your mind. No judgment, no regret. If you want to remain human, we'll find a way to make it work." "I don't want to remain human," Petra said firmly. "I want forever with you. I want to be your equal, your partner. I want this, Soren. I've never been more sure of anything." He moved to her, cupping her face gently. "The process will take 3 days, 3 days of pain unlike anything you've experienced. I'll be with you the entire time, but I can't make it stop. Can't ease it. All I can do is hold you through it. That's all I need." He kissed her then, deep and desperate, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her while she was still human. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I love you," he said fiercely. "No matter what happens, remember that. I love you more than I thought possible." "I love you too," Petra smiled. "Now stop stalling and turn me into a vampire already." He laughed, wet and broken. "As you wish." He led her to the bed, settling her in the center. She watched as he removed his shirt, revealing the pale expanse of his chest, the lean muscle beneath. "It has to be a complete exchange," he explained. "I'll drink from you first, enough to bring you to the edge of death. Then you'll drink from me, and my blood will transform you." "Will it hurt you?" Petra asked. "The draining part?" "Not like it will hurt you, but yes, it's not pleasant." He lay down beside her. "Are you ready?" Petra took a deep breath. "Yes." Soren leaned over her, his hand gentle on her throat, tilting her head to expose her neck. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I'm so sorry." Then he bit down, and Petra gasped at the sharp pain, the feeling of his fangs piercing her skin. But it faded quickly, replaced by a strange warmth that spread through her body. She felt herself growing weaker, her heartbeat slowing, and distantly she understood that she was dying. "That's it," Soren murmured against her skin. "Just let go, I've got you." Everything was fading, dimming, like someone was slowly turning down the lights. Petra's eyes drifted closed, her breathing shallow, and she felt Soren pull away. "Now," he said, and there was something wet dripping on her lips, blood, his blood. "Drink, Petra, drink and come back to me." She parted her lips, tasting copper and something else, something wild and electric. It burned going down her throat, but she swallowed anyway. Then again, drinking deep from the wound Soren had opened on his wrist. "That's enough," he said, pulling away. "Now we wait." The pain started about an hour later. It began as a warmth in her chest, almost pleasant, but it quickly grew into something unbearable. Petra felt like she was burning from the inside out, like her very blood was on fire. She screamed. Soren gathered her into his arms, holding her tight even as she thrashed. "I know," he murmured. "I know it hurts, but you're doing so well. Just hold on." The pain intensified, wave after wave of agony that made her want to claw her own skin off. She was vaguely aware of Soren speaking to her, his voice a constant presence, but she couldn't make out the words over her own screaming. Time lost all meaning. There was only pain, endless and all-consuming, and Soren's arms around her, keeping her from breaking apart completely. At some point, hours or days later, she had no idea the pain began to change. It was still there, still overwhelming, but it was different somehow, less like burning and more like breaking. Like her body was being taken apart and put back together piece by piece. Her senses sharpened. She could hear things she'd never noticed before: the whisper of air through the ventilation system, the sound of footsteps in distant corridors, the steady beat of Soren's heart. She could smell everything, a riot of scents that was almost as overwhelming as the pain. And then, finally, the pain began to fade. Petra opened her eyes. When had she closed them? And the world looked different, sharper, clearer, like someone had turned up the resolution on reality. She could see individual threads in the sheets beneath her, dust motes dancing in the air, the minute texture of Soren's skin. "Petra," Soren's voice was cautious. "Can you hear me?" "Yes," she said, and her own voice sounded strange, clearer somehow. "I can hear you." Relief flooded his face. "Thank God. How do you feel?" Petra took stock. The pain was gone, replaced by a strange humming energy that filled her entire body. She felt strong, powerful in a way she'd never experienced, and hungry. So hungry. She broke off, not sure how to articulate it. "Blood," Soren finished. "I know, I have some ready." He reached for something on the bedside table, a glass filled with dark red liquid. The smell of it hit Petra like a physical force, and she grabbed for it with a speed that startled her. "Slowly," Soren cautioned. "It's your first feeding. Take it easy." But Petra couldn't slow down. The blood was incredible, better than anything she'd ever tasted, and she drained the glass in seconds. When it was empty, she looked at Soren with wild eyes. More. He gave her another glass and another, until finally the edge of hunger dulled enough that she could think clearly. "Better?" he asked. "Better." Petra looked down at her hands. They looked the same, but when she flexed her fingers, she could feel the strength in them, the power. "It worked." "It worked," Soren agreed, and he was smiling, actually smiling, bright and genuine. "You're a vampire, Petra. You survived." She looked at him, really looked at him, and even though he'd always been beautiful, now she could see so much more. The silver flecks in his eyes, the perfect symmetry of his features, the way his skin seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. "How do I look?" she asked. "See for yourself." He handed her a mirror. Petra stared at her reflection. Her skin had gone pale, not quite as white as Soren's, but close. Her hair was still brown, but looked richer somehow, with tones she'd never noticed before. And her eyes had changed completely, from hazel to a pale silver blue. "I look like you," she said wonderingly. "You look like yourself," Soren corrected. "Just more." Petra set down the mirror, turning to face him. "We did it." "We did it." He pulled her into his arms, and she marveled at how different it felt now. She could feel the controlled strength in him, understand the care he took not to hurt her, but she could also feel that she was stronger too, that she could match him in ways she never could have as a human. "Thank you," she murmured against his chest, "for giving me this, for giving me forever with you." "Thank you," he replied, "for choosing me, for wanting forever." They stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other. Then Soren pulled back, his expression growing serious. "Now the real work begins. You need to learn to control your strength, your speed, your hunger. It will take time." "How much time?" "Months at least, maybe years before you have complete control." He smiled slightly. "Fortunately, we have nothing but time." The next few months were challenging. Petra had to relearn how to exist in the world, how to move without breaking things, how to control the constant hunger that gnawed at her. She had to learn to hunt, to feed from willing donors without taking too much. She had to adjust to sleeping during the day and living at night. But through it all, Soren was there, patient and encouraging, celebrating her victories and helping her through her failures. He introduced her formally to the vampire court, and she was accepted as his consort, his equal. Some of the older vampires looked down on her for being so newly turned, but most were welcoming, happy to see their king finally find someone. Petra discovered she had an aptitude for vampire politics, a knack for reading people and mediating disputes. Soren started bringing her to council meetings, valuing her perspective, and gradually she became not just his partner, but his advisor, his second. They settled into a rhythm, a life that felt both strange and completely natural. They traveled together, ruled together, existed together in a way that felt complete. One night, about a year after her turning, they were walking through the city streets when Petra realized where they were. "This is it," she said, stopping. "This is where I first asked you for directions." Soren looked around, recognition dawning. "So it is." Petra turned to him, thinking about that night 3 years ago when she'd been lost and desperate and had stopped a strange pale man for help. About all the nights that followed, the silent walks home, the protection she'd never known about. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Revealing yourself to me? If you'd just kept protecting me from the shadows, your life would have been simpler." "Simpler," Soren agreed, "but infinitely lonelier." He took her hands. "You changed everything for me, Petra. You made 800 years of existence feel worthwhile." "Even though I was creepy about it at first?" He laughed. "I think we can agree I was the creepy one, following you for 3 years without your knowledge." "True," she grinned. "You were definitely the creepy one. But you loved me anyway." "I loved you anyway," she confirmed. Then, more softly, "I love you still, more every day." Soren pulled her close, kissing her there on the corner where everything had begun. When they parted, Petra looked around at the familiar streets, no longer shrouded in fog. The night was clear, the stars visible overhead, and she could see everything with perfect clarity. "I'm not afraid anymore," she realized, "of these streets, of the dark, of anything. I used to be so scared, walking home alone." "You were never alone," Soren reminded her gently, "even before you knew I was there." "I know," she squeezed his hand. "Thank you for that, for keeping me safe all those years. Thank you for letting me walk beside you instead of behind you." He gestured down the street. "Shall we? For old time's sake?" Petra laughed. "Are you asking to walk me home, Soren Winter?" "I am, if you'll have me." She took his hand, twining their fingers together. "Always." They walked together through the streets, neither ahead nor behind, but side by side, equals in every way. And when they reached home, the underground court that had become theirs, filled with their people and their life together, Petra felt nothing but joy. This was her future. This was her forever. Walking through the night with the man who had loved her, from the shadows until she was ready to step into the light with him. And it was perfect. Years later, Petra would sometimes think about that first night, about the girl she'd been then, lost and tired and desperate for directions. She'd asked a stranger to show her the way home, never knowing that he'd been walking her there for years, never knowing that he would continue to walk with her for centuries to come. Soren had given her 3 years of silent protection. She had given him eternity of partnership. And together they had built something neither of them had thought possible, a love that transcended time, death, and the boundaries between human and vampire. On clear nights they still walked those old streets sometimes, Petra chattering away while Soren listened with that faint smile he reserved just for her. Sometimes they'd encounter someone lost and Soren would offer directions, his eyes meeting Petra's with private amusement. "Old habits," he'd say later, and she'd laugh. But mostly they walked for the simple joy of being together, of having each other. Two souls who had found their way home, not to a place, but to each other. And every step of the way, from that first foggy night to the endless nights stretching before them, Petra knew she'd made the right choice. To love him, to join him, to spend forever walking beside him instead of ahead. In the end, that's all love really was, wasn't it? Choosing to walk the same path, side by side, for as long as the road lasted. And their road, Petra thought with deep satisfaction, would last forever.